Well, in Ireland, like in many countries around the world, people are living longer, and of course the implication of that is that people want to make the best of the extra years that are now available, and that means having a good diet and good nutrition. So we wanted to get guidance on how you prepare, how you eat well for healthy aging. So keeping with the theme of having the best experts available, we have with us registered dietitian Ciara Pender, and Ciara is a clinical specialist dietitian to the Frailty Intervention Team at the Mater University Hospital in Dublin, and she manages the care for all older adults coming through the emergency department with frailty issues. Ciara, you are very welcome.
Thank you, Anton.
Can I start with the thing that everybody is probably going to think, which is diet for aging? It's probably like pensions. We're meant to have done it 20 years before we thought. Am I right?
Yeah, very true. But I suppose it's never too early or too late to start thinking about nutrition and healthy aging. So nutrition plays a really important role throughout the whole life cycle. If we can eat healthy and be regularly active, it can really ensure that in older age we can live a full, active life and preserve our independence into later life as well.
And when we talk about the kinds of things, because I assume most people when they think about eating for aging, things like bone health, calcium, bone density, osteoporosis, all that is at the forefront of the mind. Is that the main thing, or is it broader than that?
I suppose it's definitely broader than that. We need to look at kind of our diet as a whole. So some of the really key nutrients in ensuring that we can function well into later life would be your energy. So the energy that you get from foods in the form of calories. Also important is your protein, as well as vitamin D, calcium, like you said, B vitamins, and then your fluid and fibre intake as well. So they're all really key nutrients to have. So it's the balance. Can
we start with the protein? Because I would have thought protein was one of those things that we associate with growth and with things like heavy degree of exercise or muscle development. It's necessary for aging.
Definitely. So a lot of people do think that protein is just for sports people or bodybuilders, but really protein is so important as we grow older. So in older adults, they don't utilize protein the same way that younger adults do. So they actually require slightly more protein in comparison to younger adults. And protein, as we know, is really important in muscle strength. So we still want, as we age, to maintain our muscle strength. Obviously having that strength to do things like get out in the garden, maybe play around a golf, go for a walk with friends, cook in the kitchen. So muscle is really important to do all of those.
They don't get the same? Does that mean that if a person in their 30s and a person in their 70s eats the same piece of chicken, the person in their 30s actually extracts more protein from it?
So I suppose their body utilises the protein better when they're younger in comparison to when they're older. So when we look at older adults, the protein requirements that they have for a day as such, it needs to be spread out over the course of the day to enable the body to utilise it as best possible. So trying to have a protein source, we've got some protein sources here in front of us. So having something at breakfast, lunch and dinner, and then having protein in your snacks as well throughout the day. So like we said, some good protein sources, you can get protein from your animal products. So your meat, your chicken, your beef, your eggs, milk, yogurts, and then you can also get protein from plant sources as well. So options like your chickpeas, you can have protein in nuts and seeds, and some of the meat-based alternative products as well.
Chickpeas are a source of protein?
Yeah, a really good source of protein.
And what about the issue with changing diet? Because I assume that the older people get, maybe I do people a disservice, but I assume the older they get, the more habituated you get into the same diet. So if at a certain point you begin to think about this, do people succeed well in changing their pattern of eating, if they, like for instance, to get more protein in?
Yeah, so I suppose it's something that I suppose I would advise on daily with older adults trying to increase their protein intake. Typically what we see in the older population is people have maybe a slice of toast or a simple cereal at breakfast time, and again that's not overly high in protein. They might have something simple like a bowl of soup at lunchtime, and then a big dinner in the evening that might contain a piece of chicken or a piece of fish that would be quite high in protein. So lots of my advice for older adults kind of is based around spreading that protein intake throughout the day. So whether it's trying to have an egg at breakfast time or some baked beans on toast, and then at lunchtime it's trying to have maybe some meat in your sandwich or a glass of milk with your meat, just to try and get protein at each meal through the day rather than just the evening meal or the main meal.
You mentioned vitamin D. I would have thought that people think of vitamin D, because it gets talked about a lot now, but I would have thought people think of vitamin D as a thing that you give to little kids to supplement for the Irish weather. Important for older people and for people as they age?
Yes, definitely. So your vitamin D plays a really important role in bone health. So both calcium and vitamin D play a role in making sure that your bones are strong and firm and can support you, again, carrying out your day-to-day tasks. So when we look at vitamin D itself, its main role is ensuring that the calcium can get into the bones and the cells. So that's why vitamin D is so important. And you've mentioned, obviously, vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin would be another word or another term usually associated with it. So in the months of kind of late March to late September, our skin, through exposure to the sun, can synthesize vitamin D. But again, it's quite a short period of time, March to September, and the sun needs to be at a certain angle in the sky, so it's the UVB rays that synthesize vitamin D in the skin. So 90% of our vitamin D does come from that synthesis in the skin, but we can also get vitamin D from food sources. So we've got some food sources here that will be high in vitamin D, things like our oily fish, our milk, and then other sources would be eggs, liver, and you can also get some foods that are fortified with vitamin D. So there's products in most supermarkets at the moment, such as milk, yogurt, cereals, that you'll see on the labels they're fortified with vitamin D. But I suppose overall, we can't get enough vitamin D from the sun and food alone. So last November, the Department of Health did recommend that all older adults over the age of 65 take a supplement of vitamin D daily. So it's a 15 microgram supplement of vitamin D, and that's what everybody should be taking if they're over 65
That's just a couple of drops in cereal or...
Yeah, so there's multiple different forms. It can be taken in a liquid or a tablet form. The only thing is lots of older adults are already prescribed vitamin D, so before you start buying over-the-counter vitamin D, check your prescription. It might not be called vitamin D, it might be under a different medication name or brand as such, so always link in with your GP, your dietitian or your pharmacist before starting to take a vitamin D supplement.
And is it only during the winter period, it's only from September through to March that you should supplement, or is it a year-round thing?
It's the whole year round is the recommendation, so 15 micrograms a day for the whole year, and that just covers us and ensures that we're getting adequate vitamin D throughout both the summer and the winter months.
You said that its main role was in helping bones to absorb calcium. Getting enough calcium itself, I presume, is a separate and equally important task.
Yes, yeah. So calcium is really important, like I said, in maintaining strong and firm bones. So calcium throughout the life cycle is important, but I suppose it's never too late to ensure optimum bone health. So in particular, after the menopause, women can be at risk of bone thinning, something that we call osteoporosis. So it's even more important for women to ensure they get adequate calcium. So when we look at the recommendation for calcium, it's 3 portions of calcium a day for older adults. So again, we have some nice portions of what a portion of calcium would be here on this front shopping board. So a small pot of yogurt would class as a portion of calcium, a 200 ml glass of milk. You've also got some non-dairy sources of calcium as well. So for people maybe that don't like dairy or don't eat dairy, figs are a really good source of calcium. So about half of this bowl of figs would be the equivalent of 1 portion of calcium. And you've also got your sardines as well. So a half a tin of sardines. It'd take a fair
bit of commitment to eat half a bowl of figs though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I suppose.
You wouldn't really like your figs.
You would, and I think it's an acquired taste, but some older adults do quite like figs. So again, it's just that there are options. It doesn't always have to be the typical, the kind of what you typically think of when it comes to calcium. There is calcium in other foods.
Can I ask you, because we've talked a lot now about the milk providing things like protein, providing things like calcium. To any extent, do people worry when they see fortification on products? Do they think that suggests processed or somehow bad? Is there any concern with it?
I suppose the fortification of products, it's really beneficial. So like I've said in relation to vitamin D, because there's not a lot of foods naturally that contain vitamin D, it's really beneficial that companies are taking it onto themselves to fortify products such as your cereal, some of your breads. You know, it enables us to get another source of vitamin D to enable us to achieve the amount that we need.
So we've talked a lot about the balanced diet and the various different things that should be in it. The one thing we haven't mentioned so far, what about fruits and veg?
Yeah, so fruits and veg are really important for the older adult as well. The recommendation is 5 to 7 portions over the course of a day. So when we think of our fruit and veg intake, it's really important to have a wide variety of different colours of fruit and veg. And often what I say to older adults is think of the rainbow, so think of the colours of the rainbow and ensure that you're getting a piece of fruit and veg of each colour over the course of the day.
So if I start the day with a strawberry, it's an apple for lunch. If I have an apple for lunch, it's a banana.
Exactly, so that variety is really key, and that just ensures, I suppose, that we're getting all of the recommended vitamins and minerals by choosing a range of different colours of fruit and veg.
What about portion sizes? Because I suspect if somebody doesn't eat a lot and they've looked at the list that we've talked about already, there's a huge quantity in theory if you did it all in one go. Do people, as they age, first of all, does their portion size intrinsically shrink without even noticing? Do they eat less?
Yeah, so I suppose as people age, often their appetite can reduce, and numerous factors affect the appetite of an older person. So sometimes people become less active, and therefore they're not expending as much energy, so they don't feel that they're stimulating their appetite. So a simple solution would be a little walk before dinner, getting some fresh air, and that can stimulate the appetite. Other factors would be kind of the reduced sense of our taste buds. So as we grow older, our taste can change, and we might not taste foods the same way. And that's just part of aging, and some people will experience it, other people won't. But a way to kind of...
Sorry, that you perceive taste differently or you perceive taste less?
So less, your taste buds change, yeah. And again, some people do experience it, others don't, but often a way of, again, that can cause a reduced appetite because food that you presume and think will taste a certain way suddenly changes. And it might not be suddenly, it often is a gradual process, but a way of kind of influencing that and maybe ensuring that you do still get enjoyment out of food is trying to eat some new foods. So some foods that maybe you've not had before or you don't have very often and that you don't associate a certain taste with. So therefore, if you're not tasting it maybe as strong as you should, because it's a new taste, it won't turn you off the food as much.
Talk to me a bit more about that thing of introducing new foods, because I had heard this. There is the belief that says that if you introduce new foods to an established pattern, you may not react well with them, you may not have the right bacteria in your gut, all of that. Is that the case?
I suppose it's a little bit of trial and error. As you said, older people are set in their ways and they often would follow a very similar routine day to day. So introducing new foods, it's often introduce one new food at a time so that you know if it doesn't agree with you or if you have any symptoms that maybe you haven't experienced before, that you can link it back to that one change rather than making lots of changes all at once.
And what about for elderly people or for people who are aging? Hydration. The level of water intake, again, is that the same throughout life or does it increase or decrease?
So for older adults, the recommendation would be for women to have 6 to 8 cups of fluid, which is 1.6 litres, and for men to have 8 to 10 cups of fluid, which is 2 litres over the course of a day. So older adults
it's enough. Are often... 2 litres is a fair quantity.
Yeah, but I suppose you can get your fluid from a variety of different sources. So some examples we have here, obviously you've got your juice, cordial, water, teas, milk, and again these options, they come in a variety of different flavours, but you can also have them hot or cold, so there's variety available, and you can also get some fluid from food sources. So we've got a nice little bowl of soup here, or some jelly, ice cream, yogurt. These are all food sources that also provide fluid and can keep us hydrated.
Oh, jelly counts?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But how do you then figure that out? Because I assume you end up almost with an Excel spreadsheet trying to work out how much fluid was in that soup.
I suppose not necessarily. It's an estimate, so that
Right.
kind of your 8 to 10 cups. You have a cup of jelly there, that might count towards one of the cups as such. So it's a rough balance. I suppose older people, they're quite prone to dehydration, and thirst can't be used as a reliable predictor of dehydration with some older adults. So sometimes adults with dementia, or maybe they've had a stroke in the past, that sensation of thirst may not be there any longer. So it's not waiting until you feel thirsty, it's trying to plan your fluid intake over the course of the day, and planning when you're going to get, if you're a woman, your 6 to 8 cups in throughout the day, or if you're a man, your 8 to 10 cups in.
And I presume one of the challenges that, I mean, in talking to some of my older friends, one of the things they talk about a lot is getting uninterrupted sleep, and how more challenging that can be as you get a bit older. Presumably they're reluctant, therefore, to drink a lot before they go to bed in case that precious sleep gets ruined.
Yeah. And I suppose, again, in and around planning your fluids, trying to drink your main bulk of your fluids earlier in the day rather than late at night. Some people like to have a cup of coffee after dinner, and again, the caffeine in the coffee can increase the need to want to go to the toilet overnight, and it can also means that you take longer to go to sleep, and then the quality of your sleep is worse as well. So again, kind of shifting that fluid intake to earlier in the day rather than later in the day, especially when it comes to your caffeinated drinks.
You've raised coffee, you've raised tea. Whenever you say to anybody, I'm hydrating by drinking tea or coffee, somebody in the room will say, coffee and tea are diuretics. You lose more liquid than you gain from drinking the cup. Myth or fact?
So when it comes to coffee, fact, you will become further, coffee doesn't count towards your fluid intake during the day. But when it comes to tea does count towards that fluid recommendation for the day.
Really? So tea isn't as diuretic as coffee?
No, it's counted towards your fluid intake. Interestingly though, there's been new guidelines from the Food Safety Authority Ireland, so tea has been quite topical of late, in particular strong tea. So the recommendation around strong tea, and something to consider when you're drinking your cups of tea through the day, is to have your tea in between your meals rather than with your meals. So strong tea can actually affect the absorption of certain nutrients, so iron and zinc in particular can be affected by having a strong cup of tea with your meal as such. So just making sure it's between meals rather than with your meals.
We've talked a lot about what you should eat and your nutrition for yourself. What if you're thinking about an intervention with an older relative or somebody for whom you care? What are the telltale warning signs, and what's the best way to intervene if you feel it's necessary?
Yeah, so I suppose lots of people might notice with maybe, like you say, somebody that they're caring for, something they might notice is weight loss, and the weight loss can be linked back to having a reduced appetite, like we mentioned earlier. So older adults can be prone to having a reduced appetite, but if you do notice weight loss, it's really key to take action. So some simple advice that I would often provide is, instead of having your 3 regular meals a day that might be quite large portions, if you have a reduced appetite and you're only managing to eat maybe half or a couple of spoonfuls of these big meals, trying to have 5 to 6 smaller portions of food throughout the course of the day. So nutritious smaller portions. So for example, something like maybe baked beans on toast, or cheese and crackers, a little pot of yogurt with some fruit. So ensuring that even though it's a small portion, it's really nutrient dense. So we're still getting enough energy and protein, but we're having the smaller portions of food more frequently through the day. Other ways that you can again help prevent further weight loss in someone you're caring for is to think of adding calories into the foods they're already having. So if you take a bowl of soup, for example, adding a tablespoon of cream in, mixing it in, you'll get some more calories and protein, but you won't necessarily increase the volume of the food being consumed. Another simple solution like that of adding calories into foods would be, if you're having a bowl of porridge in the morning, adding maybe a tablespoon of some ground nuts in, mixing it in. It doesn't overly change the taste, but it adds in some protein and calories. So,
and presumably in doing that, you're trying to add useful calories as opposed to just straight sugars.
Yes, yeah. So often what we do kind of focus on is things like your cream, your full fat milk, cheese, butter, your ground nuts. They're all really good foods to add in, again, because they they fortify what we're already having. So they're adding calories and protein into.
And it's a question that comes up a lot at various phases of diet. What about calorie counting? Let's say you're responsible for an older adult, or you're helping an older adult. Should you be looking out and saying, okay, I'm targeting 1,800, 2,000 per day, how am I going to get it into them?
I suppose not necessarily, no. What you want to do, and I suppose the best way to ensure that you're getting adequate nutrition as an older adult, is to keep an eye on your weight. So weight can be a really good signal. If we're eating too little, often we can see or experience weight loss, whereas if we're eating too much, often we can experience weight gain. So what we want to do is keep that weight relatively stable. Obviously, if you've experienced a reduced appetite and you've lost weight, you're trying to regain that weight. So it is a balancing act, but it's not necessarily based around focusing on figures and calorie targets. It's just keeping an eye on that balance. And if you do look after somebody that has lost weight and you've tried to implement some of the strategies we've discussed, it's really important to link back in with the GP and kind of inform the GP that, you know, there is weight loss. And the GP can then refer into the community dietitian and kind of plan an intervention to help you prevent further weight loss.
Final thing, Ciara, you obviously deal with an awful lot of people who come in seeking your clinical expertise, and a lot of that may be something has gotten to the level of being an acute problem. We've talked about an awful lot of positive interventions. If there's one overarching principle when it comes to diet as you age or helping an older person with their diet, what is it?
Really, it's that little and often approach. It's increasing the frequency of meals and not being overphased by food. We want older adults, and everyone wants to enjoy food as they age. You know, it can be something that you know, a social event can be based around. Obviously, you know, you want to just enjoy your food. So, because ensuring that you're getting the adequate amount when it comes to the nutrients we focused on. So, your energy, your protein, and your vitamins and minerals. It's really key, even though that's what we're trying to do and ensure that we don't lose weight and we get adequate nutrition. We really want you to just enjoy your food.
Ciara, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.